Episode 7. Shadows of Trust. The Nevada foothills rose like silent giants against the pre-dawn sky, their rugged slopes cloaked in the deep purple of night that slowly gave way to the first tentative hints of gray. A canvas of transition painted. With the delicate brushstrokes of dawn, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and the faint temps of frost that clung to the higher elevations. A whisper of winter's approach threading through the desert's arid heart. The salt flats behind them shimmered faintly under the waning moonlight. A ghostly expanse that stretched into the darkness. Its white surface a stark contrast to the shadowy pines that dotted the foothills ahead, their dark forms swaying gently. In the breeze, a natural fortress against the open wasteland. The ground beneath their feet was a mosaic of rocky outcrops and soft pine needles. Crunching with each step, the sound a muted rhythm against the stillness that enveloped the landscape. A heartbeat in the vast silence that seemed to hold its breath. The first light of dawn broke over the ridge, casting long shadows that stretched across the path like the fingers of a reluctant sun. The golden rays filtering through the branches in a hesitant promise, illuminating the dew that glistened on. The needles turning the forest into a cathedral of light and shadow. A sanctuary amid the peril. Jacob Kane led the way, his boots sinking slightly into the uneven terrain, the leather creaking with the weight of his stance, the soles worn thin. From days of flight, his silver-streaked black hair was damp with the night's chill. Strands clinging to his weathered face where scars traced the map of a life hard lived. Each line a testament to battles fought and survived, the faint stubble on his jaw catching. The dawn's light, his shoulder, bearing the twin grazes from the gulch and canyon skirmishes, throbbed beneath his torn cotton shirt. The fabric stiff with dried blood and dust, the sleeve hanging in tatters where a bullet had grazed him. The threads catching on the rough bark of passing trees, a silent chronicle of their journey. The wound on his side, hastily bound by Nita in the crevice with a strip of her dress, pulled with each step, a dull ache that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Reminder of the cost of their flight, but his Winchester rifle hung ready at his side, its polished barrel glinting with a promise of protection, the woodstock worn smooth by his grip. A companion that grounded him in the chaos that had become their existence. Nita walked beside him, her limping gait steadier on the rocky ground. The bandage on her thigh now a faded pink beneath the tattered hem of her Navajo dress. The red and brown patterns dulled by the journey's toll, the fabric clinging to her slender frame like a second skin. Its edges frayed from snags on thorns and rocks, a testament to her endurance. Her dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the forested slopes with a mix of hope and suspicion, reflecting the dawn's first light like twin pools of obsidian. Her hand resting on the dagger at her waist, its hilt worn smooth by her grip, a familiar anchor in the uncertainty that loomed ahead. The ledger tucked within the folds of her dress, pressed against her chest, its weight a constant reminder of their perilous mission, the names of Harrington, Voss, and Caldwell, a silent chant in her mind, their ink a blood stain on the pages of history, a burden she carried with the grace of a warrior. Her shoulder, grazed in the trading post, ached with a quiet persistence. A dull throb that she ignored, her posture upright a testament to her strength. Her breath visible in the cool air as she matched Jacob's pace, her presence a steadying force behind them. The Navajo women followed with a quiet resilience that spoke of their unbreakable spirit. Their footsteps a soft echo against the forest floor, a symphony of survival. Shima led the group, her silver hair glinting like frost in the dim light, each strand a thread of wisdom woven into the tapestry of her being. A beacon that guided them through the shadows, her steps deliberate and sure, her small bow its wood. Darkened by years of use and polished by the oils of her hands, was slung over her shoulder, the string taut with the promise of defense. A silent guardian in the gathering dawn, its curve a familiar weight against her back, the fletching of her arrows peeking from a quiver at her hip. Her face, etched with the lines of decades, held a calm that masked the tension in her grip on an arrow. Her fingers resting lightly on the fletching, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Her eyes scanning the perimeter with the vigilance of A seasoned tracker, the faintest crease of concern at the corner of her mouth. Aoi trailed close to Shima, her arms cradling her newborn with a tenderness that belied the harshness of their surroundings. The child's soft coos a fragile melody that pierced the rustle of pine needles, a lullaby of innocence amid the danger. They fled. The baby's tiny face, nestled against her chest, was peaceful, its eyes closed in a slumber that seemed a miracle, its breath a gentle rise and fall that mirrored the rhythm of her steps, a heartbeat of hope in the pre-dawn gloom. The faint warmth of its body a comfort against the chill. Tala and Kiona flanked the group, their daggers sheathed, but their postures alert. Their lithe forms cutting through the air like shadows cast by the rising sun. Their gazes sharp as they watched the tree line, every rustle a potential threat. Their movements a dance of vigilance across the shifting terrain, steel of their blades glinting faintly as they adjusted their grips. Eli, the wiry newcomer, brought up the rear, his patched coat blending with the shadows of the pines, the fabric catching the light as he moved. It seemed strained from where, his shotgun cradled in his arms with a casual readiness that belied the tension in his frame. His expression guarded as he scanned for signs of pursuit, his boots leaving faint impressions in the soft earth. The faint creak of the weapon, a constant undertone. "We're close to the caravan route," Nita said, her voice low, cutting through. The morning stillness, like a blade through silk, the words carrying a weight of hope she dared not fully voice. She paused, shading her eyes with a hand to peer at the ridge ahead, the pines thickening as they climbed, their dark forms a promise of cover. The branches swaying gently in the breeze. "Jeez." Lila says it's just beyond the next ridgeway. The trail widens into a valley, a natural pass where the wagons can turn. We'll need to move fast, before the sun climbs too high and exposes us to their eyes. Jacob nodded, his gaze fixed on the ridge, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he calculated their next move, the rifle shifting slightly in his hands, the barrel catching a ray of dawn light. "The scout's betrayal changes things," he replied, his voice a low rumble, the suspicion thick in his tone. A shield against the unknown, his breath visible in the cool air. "I'll have told them our direction Harrington's men could be waiting, their guns trained on that valley, their horses hidden in the trees. We need to be ready, eyes open, weapons loose, every step a gamble." Lila, walking beside her sister, adjusted the ledger within the folds of her dress, her young face taut with worry. The parchment's edges crinkling softly against her skin, the sound of faint whisper in the stillness. "I remember the caravan leader Turok," she added, her voice soft but firm. A thread of steel beneath the gentleness as she met Jacob's gaze, her eyes reflecting the dawn's light. "He's honorable, a man of his word from the day. Pulled his son from that flash flood 2 summers ago, the water roaring like a beast. But if the tycoons have reached him with their silver, their promises of power, we might face more than riders, more than guns." Eli interrupted, his voice rough with the dust of the trail, his shotgun shifting in his grip as he stepped closer to the group, the barrel glinting faintly in the light. "I've dealt with Turok before, traded hides for supplies when my homestead still stood, the smoke of my barn still fresh in my nose," he said, his eyes flickering with a memory of loss, the lines of his face deepening with each word. "He's a hard bargainer, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. But he hates the railroad as much as I'd lost a brother to their enforcers, a man beaten bloody on the flats. We can trust him for a price, a fair trade of goods, or a promise of protection, a bond sealed in the dust." The group pressed on, the terrain growing steeper with each step, the air thinning as they ascended, the scent of pine growing stronger, mingling with the faint musk of moss that clung to the rocks, the coolness a balm against their heated skin. The first light of dawn broke fully over the ridge, casting long shadows that stretched across the pine-strewn path, the golden rays filtering through the branches in a hesitant promise, illuminating the dew that glistened on the needles, turning the forest into a cathedral of light and shadow, a sanctuary amid the peril. The path widened as they crested the ridge, revealing a narrow valley below, the ground leveling into a defile framed by towering pines. And the caravan came into view, a line of wagons and horses winding through the pass, their canvas covers flapping in the breeze, the scent of wood smoke and leather drifting upward, a promise of respite that hung heavy in the air. But the scene was marred by tension. Figures on horseback flanked the caravan, their scarves fluttering like flags of war, their guns glinting in the dawn light. A stark warning that froze the breath in Jacob's chest, the barrels trained on. The trail with deadly intent. Ambush, Jacob muttered, raising his rifle with a swift motion, the stock pressing against his shoulder, his finger hovering over the trigger, the metal cool against his skin, his green eyes narrowing as he assessed. The threat. They're waiting for us, positioned to cut us off from the wagons, their shadows blending with the trees. Before he could act, a shot rang out. The bullet whizzing past Nita's head with a high-pitched whine, embedding itself in a pine trunk with a sharp crack, sending a shower of bark and sap into the air, the scent sharp and bitter. The group scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and trees, the valley erupting in chaos as more shots followed, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the sharp tang of fear, the echoes bouncing off the valley walls. Shima's bow sang, her arrow streaking through the air with a soft whistle, striking a rider's shoulder with a wet thud, the fletching quivering as he reeled back with a cry, his gun dropping into the dust, his horse rearing in panic. Tala! And Kiona darted forward, their daggers flashing in the dim light, a blur of motion as they engaged two men in a synchronized dance of steel, their blades finding flesh with a precision that left no room for mercy, the attackers falling with gasps that echoed off the valley walls, their blood staining the pine needles. Jacob fired, his shot booming across the defile with a roar that shattered the silence, dropping a gunman with a clean hit to the chest. The man slumping from his saddle with a heavy thud, but more riders emerged, their numbers swelling as the caravan's guards joined the fray, caught in the crossfire, their shouts a cacophony of confusion and resistance, the clash of metal and the thud of hooves filling the air. Nita pulled Jacob behind a stout pine, her hand on his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve with a desperation that belied her strength, her eyes fierce with a fire that burned brighter than the gunfire, the dawn light catching the determination in her gaze. "We need to reach Turok, the ledger to him," she said, her voice a blade of steel, cutting through the din, her breath ragged with the effort. "He can help us escape, get it to Virginia City, a judge beyond their reach. I'll draw. Their fire, you cover me, keep them off my back." Jacob nodded, his heart pounding with a fear he couldn't voice, his hand brushing hers as he steadied his rifle, the wood warm against his palm, covering her as she moved toward the caravan. Her limp slowing her, but not her resolve, her form a silhouette against the dawn. A rider charged, his gun aimed with deadly intent, the barrel glinting as he closed the distance, his horse's hooves pounding the earth. But Eli's shotgun boomed with a roar that shook the valley, the pellets kicking up sand and halting the attack, the rider veering off with a shout, his mount stumbling in the chaos. The chaos intensified, bullets and arrows filling the air, the valley echoing with the thud of hooves and the crack of gunfire, the pines trembling with the violence, branches snapping under the weight of stray shots. Nita reached Turok, a broad man with a weathered face and a gray-streaked beard, his leather vest scarred from years on the trail, the creases of his skin telling tales of hardship, and thrust the ledger into his hands, her voice urgent, her breath ragged, her fingers trembling slightly as she released it. "Protect the stake at east of Virginia City," she said, her eyes locking with his, a plea and a command in one. "We'll hold them off, buy you time." Turok hesitated, his hand closing around the parchment, the rough texture familiar under his calloused fingers. His gaze flickering to the battle, the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded, then nodded, his voice a gravelly command as he barked orders to his men to secure the wagons. Their movements a flurry of activity as they repositioned the caravan into a defensive circle, the canvas flapping like wings in the breeze. Jacob and the women formed a defensive line, their weapons a wall against the onslaught, the air thick with the scent of pine and blood, the ground littered with spent shells and broken arrows. A bullet grazed Jacob's leg, a hot sting that drew a grunt from his lips, the pain a sharp counterpoint to the adrenaline coursing through his veins, and he stumbled, his knee buckling beneath him, the rifle slipping in his grasp. Nita caught him, her arms wrapping around his waist, her strength a lifeline as she lowered him behind a rock, her hands steady as she pressed against the wound, the fabric of his pants darkening with blood, her breath warm against his ear. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, her hand brushing his cheek in a moment of tenderness amid the storm. Connection that steadied them both, her touch a balm against the pain. The tide turned as Turok's guards rallied, their rifles barking in unison. Their reports of thunder that rolled through the valley, driving the riders back with a hail of lead, the air thick with the smoke of battle. The surviving attackers fled, their hoofbeats fading into the foothills, leaving behind a silence broken only by the crackle of a burning wagon wheel, its embers glowing red against the dawn, and the soft moans of the wounded, their voices a haunting echo. Exhausted, the group collapsed near the wagons, their breaths heavy, the scent of smoke and pine mingling in the air. The canvas overhead, a shield against the rising sun. Nita's hand remained in Jacob's, their fingers interlaced. A silent promise amid the aftermath, her touch a warmth that seeped into his bones, a lifeline in the chaos. Turok approached, the ledger clutched in his calloused hands, the parchment crinkling softly as he moved, his face grim but resolute, the lines of his face etched deeper by the fight. "I'll get this to Virginia City," he promised, his voice steady, a vow sealed in the dust. But the scout he was seen with them, riding with Harrington's men, his scarf fluttering like a traitor's flag. He's turned coat for good, sold his soul for their gold. The betrayal stung anew, a fresh wound on their already scarred trust. The realization, a bitter pill that lodged in Jacob's throat, but his gaze met Nita's, a silent vow to face it together, their eyes reflecting the dawn's light, a depth that drew him in, a bond that transcended the battle. The foothills whispered with shadows of trust, the scouts' treachery a dark thread in their tapestry, yet their love burned brighter. A flame that flickered against the encroaching darkness, a light to guide them through the trials ahead, a promise whispered in the rustle of pine and the beat of their hearts. Episode 7. Fires of Alliance. Episode 7 sees Jacob and Nita battle a fierce ambush to secure the ledger with Turok's caravan. But the scouts' treachery deepens the danger, casting long shadows over their trust. Can their love and new alliance withstand the tycoons' far-reaching grasp? Tune in for Episode 8 to uncover the scouts' next move. If you're captivated by this saga, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. To catch every thrilling moment, share your thoughts on Turok's role in the comments below.